This is Stephanie Mann, and I'm the executive director of SafeKidsNow.com. And I'm here with Rebecca Kimball from Utah, and she is a cult survivor. And I've asked her to tell her story of one of the real landmarks for her when she was 4.5 years old. It was a life-changing moment. So, Rebecca, could you tell us that story?
We were running alongside of the road, hiding behind the bushes. My mother was very large with her next baby. The baby was due any time. We were frightened. We were hiding from the police. The police were searching for polygamists and picking up the men to put them in prison, or we were told, take us away from our parents and we would never see them again. My older sister was someplace else. My brothers went deep into the bushes and hid. Mother was getting very tired, and she said, there's a house up here where there's a lady I know, but she's a Catholic. We were taught that Catholics were really, really bad, that they were the devil's people themselves because they didn't belong to our religion. We were the choicest people on earth, so we were told, even though we lived very much like white trash in our home where I grew up. When Mama knocked on the door, she said, Rebecca, don't you say anything, not one word. You hear me? I was really afraid. When the woman opened the door, I was standing in front of Mother, and she invited us in, and I can still feel Mama's hand in my back just pushing me inside as I was leaning against it in resistance. I was really afraid. I held on Mom's skirts and kind of hid behind her while the two talked. Inside the house, I was so amazed. It was beautiful. Everything was clean. Everything. The floor, everything. And the furniture matched. I had never seen anything so pretty. I thought it was a palace. I looked around, but I didn't let go of Mom's skirt. While the two women talked, I gazed. My eyes came to rest on two little Hummel figurines, a little Swiss boy and a little Swiss girl, inside of a glass cabinet. I looked around further, but my eyes always came back and looked at them. I thought they were the most beautiful things I had ever seen. Then the lady said to me, do you like them? And I was terrified because Mama told me not to speak. And I couldn't speak. So the woman looked at Mom and she said, will you give your little girl permission to talk to me? And Mom shook me hard and said, Rebecca, answer the lady. I couldn't. I had no voice, but I shook my head yes. And she said, I'm going to give them to you. And then she turned to my mother and she said, will you allow your little girl to have these and promise me that you will not take them away from her? And Mother was embarrassed, and she said, well, you really shouldn't give them to her. And she said, I want to. Will you allow her to have them? And Mother said, yes. And she said, then I have your promise she can keep them. And Mother said, yes. The woman went to the cabinet. She took the figurines out, and she gave them to me. And I could feel in that transition the most peace and the most love I had ever felt in my life coming from this woman to me. To me. The emotion I experienced coming from her was unlike anything that I'd ever experienced in my home. There was a peace in her home that I had never known. There was a tranquility. There was an acceptance. And I could feel it, and it was real. And I knew in that moment that what I'd been taught was wrong about other people. There were good people outside of our religious group because I was standing next to one. She handed me the figurines. Those figurines stayed in my home until I became a grandmother. And they were always a source of inspiration to me every time I saw them. Years later, I returned to Colorado City, which has now changed its name on the Utah-Nevada border, to see my sister Mildred. And when I got there, I had arrived from Las Vegas and was an out-of-towner, and nobody would tell me where she lived. But when I gave my pedigree sheet, the number of wives my father had, and who he was, and which sister I wanted to see, I was directed immediately to her home. Inside of her home, I had the opportunity of meeting my little nieces and nephews, which were many. There was one shy little blonde girl, very polite and very afraid, that would look at me and stand back, and with curiosity and fear all mixed. She reminded me of me when I was a little girl. So I started to talk to her, and I started to tell her that I was her Aunt Becky, and that I was so glad to be able to see her. And I turned to my sister Mildred and I said, Millie, can I give her something? And if I give her something, will you let her keep it? It isn't much, but will you let her keep it? And Mildred was a little embarrassed, and she said, well, I guess, what is it? And I said, it's just some change I have in my pocket, but it's not much, it's mostly pennies. And she said, okay. See, we weren't allowed to keep money. If we earned money at all, we had to give it to our parents to help support the family, no matter how little we were. So that's why I needed the assurance. I gave her the pennies. I told her that she was beautiful. I told her that I was proud of her. I told her that I loved her and I didn't know when I would see her again. And then I went back to Las Vegas. Years later, many years later, I was walking down the street in Salt Lake City, and I heard someone call my name, and behind me there was a young woman who was dragging one little child and carrying another, calling my name, trying to catch up with me. And I stopped, and I didn't recognize her, but she said, I know you don't know me, but I know you. You're my Aunt Becky. You changed my life. I just want you to realize that you can change a life in a few minutes. In a few minutes. If what you say is real, honest, loving, acceptance. Children are wiser than you think. Use this opportunity. You can change a life. It doesn't cost a dime.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's an inspirational story. We all will benefit from it. Thank you.